Well, Rich, apparently it takes a village to educate at least me about cryptocurrency. So we have some of the state's best experts here to help teach all of us a little bit more about this evolution in money. And I'd like to introduce them to you right now. First, we have Dave Carter, who is a finance professor at Oklahoma State University. We have Damon King, who is an investment advisor at Chapel Wood Financial Services. Matt Moore, who is an Oklahoma cryptocurrency consultant, and Chris Ransdell, who is Vice President of American Bit Power. I'd like to thank all of you for being with us.
Thank you, Susan.
For having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Matt, I'm going to start with you in the simplest question. What is cryptocurrency?
Well, first and foremost, what I like to tell people when I dive into the subject is they have to first understand the problem before they can even understand cryptocurrency a lot of times. Because if you don't understand the problem, you're not going to understand the solution. And I could most certainly go down and break that down. But to put it really simply, what things like Bitcoin are valuable because it's the world's first peer-to-peer, decentralized, permissionless computer network in which is both a currency and a payment system. Bitcoin is literally the safest tool and the smartest tool in transacting value peer-to-peer in a digital age. So it's very conducive for artificial intelligence, for automation. It's programmable money, but with that comes predictability and also different practices in monetary policy.
Okay, Chris, I want to come to you next. What is the stumbling block for most of us when it comes to understanding cryptocurrency? What do you run into when you try to explain it to people?
Well, most people want to have something tangible. They want to have something in their hand. And I actually used to carry around, and still do carry around, a little pretend Bitcoin. And when they ask me what's Bitcoin, I hold this up and I pretend like it is, and then I tell them it's not. But the main reason is I ask them how much money do they have, and when they say, well, I have a decent amount, I'm doing all right, and they go, well, how much do you have in cash? And when they find out that our U.S. banks have less than 4% of the U.S. dollar count, the M1, M2 count in existence, and 96% plus is actually all virtual. And I go, all it takes is an extra 3.5%, and we're crypto. And so it's helping them realize that the physical, tangible nature of fiat currency is an illusion. It's something we all just have grown up with. But the reality is money is just an acceptance of value exchange. And when you learn that the fiat currency, the currency that a government gives you, is the value is determined by the government. It's determined by what people that are outside of our control are deciding. Whereas cryptocurrency is actually a democratic value. We are actually the people telling the money what it's worth. It empowers the people, it empowers the populace, and that could scare governments that want to be tyrannical. And so it's a fun path to go down to find out what part of cryptocurrency are they most reticent to accept, and what parts are they excited to accept, And so I like to kind of feel out my audience every time I speak with somebody.
And you have a kind of an artistic depiction of Bitcoin behind you, right there in your wall.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, my little Bitcoin to the moons.
I had to point that out. Hey, Dave, I want to come to you next because you're teaching in our schools. You've been at OSU for a long time. How do you approach this subject with students? Are they eager to learn it? Do they get it really quick? Is it just us old fuddy-duddies who can't get it?
No, that's a great question. And I'm probably, I don't know, maybe one of those old fuddy-duddies that doesn't quite get it. But no, they are generally very interested in the whole concept. I mean, beyond Bitcoin, obviously, even with investing, I am impressed with some platforms like Robinhood that have of recent democratized investing. So I have a lot more students today that are investors in general than say 5 or 10 years ago. In a class of 150, 10 years ago, I may have had 2 or 3 students that own stock. Today, it's still a small number, but a lot more with Robinhood that can do that. But Bitcoin and other cryptos are certainly investments that they would like to make. And I have a lot of students that ask about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. It's one that's very popular. My children, college-age children, my wife and I also invest in cryptocurrencies.
All right, so here we're going to come to the investment. Nice segue, Dave, to Damon. who knows all about investments. Damon, what are your thoughts on this latest evolution? Good thing, bad thing? What do you think of it? Are we waiting to see? Give us the information we need to know as consumers.
Well, as a fiduciary investment advisor and financial advisor, I tend not to think about financial strategies in terms of good or bad. I think about them in terms of appropriate or inappropriate for what you are trying to do. The simple fact of the matter is that Bitcoin and other cryptos right now, as more popular as they were becoming, are still quite volatile in price. You see these wild swings in price. The average retiree, and that's mostly who I work with, so you've got younger people on that end of the spectrum, but as you get closer to retirement, typically you want a little bit more consistency, a little bit more predictability. And for many people who are in or very near retirement, Bitcoin can be extremely, and crypto can be extremely volatile. So quite honestly, we tend to stay away from it for that purpose. But I think a bigger issue for a lot of investors when it comes to crypto, it's not necessarily that they don't understand crypto, their financial advisors don't understand it either. And in fact, as a fiduciary, I have to ask myself, can I meet my fiduciary standard and give advice on crypto? And if I tell someone, yeah, you should go add crypto to your portfolio, and then the next day it declines about $20,000, how am I, as a fiduciary advisor, meeting my obligation? The SEC hasn't really put out a lot of guidance on crypto. So financial advisors who have a legal obligation to keep their clients' best interests in mind are looking to our primary regulatory agencies for guidance. It's not there, not yet. Do I believe that crypto is going to become more mainstream and more accepted as a form of payment? Yes, I do. I think it's just a matter of time. But right now, there's still a lot of uncertainty. And as a fiduciary advisor, I'm very cautious about recommending it for clients simply because I have to meet my obligation.
Okay, Matt and Chris. Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
No, I was just,
David. Okay.
I'm sorry. I was just going to kind of play on that as well. I think Damon made some great comments about the volatility and risk involved with it. And certainly one of the things that we like to talk about in our classes here with students has to do with that issue. It is quite volatile. And I think that that has to be part of your investing decision with respect to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin.
All right. And now, Matthew and Chris, I do want to come to you guys. I want you to explain. We have terms, and this was supposed to be my second question, but I really wanted to get the full lay of the land before we went into the weeds. I want to ask you about blockchain technology and crypto mining, and you two are really situated to be able to explain that to us in layman's terms. So Matthew, I'll let you go first if you want to tackle one of those two issues, or right, however you want to let us know.
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm going to make comment on the volatility issue. As something that is emerging and as a new technology and something that has been the best performing asset over the last decade, despite people's concerns about volatility, I almost feel like it's irresponsible to not at least have 1% exposure at minimum to an asset class that's giving people 200% returns a year. And yes, it is risky, but for the most part, if you look at the track record of things like Bitcoin, it's higher highs and higher lows, and you just have to ask yourself what your time preference is. And I'm not trying to give financial advice here, but the beautiful thing about blockchain technology is it's revolutionizing. Blockchain is going to do for money and value what the internet did to communication and information. And for those people who are standing on the sidelines, I really do think they will regret at one point or other for not at least dabbling in it and learning and getting educated, because the more you get educated, the less fearful you are, the more you understand it, and also understanding monetary history, where we are in the monetary process and evolution of our current system, and how we're coming to the very end and are due for a great reset or some restructuring or default. I do think, when you look at things like Napster back in the day when it came to music, perfect example, central point of failure. The government was able to shut down Napster because there was a CEO, there was a building, there was a location, there were servers where all of this information was stored. But then you had things like BitTorrent, where people were sharing bits and pieces of this information to make a complete file that were coming from millions of computers or hundreds of computers around the world. And there was no one place to go to stop it. And so, in my opinion, Bitcoin is inevitable. And I think when you look at an open source software that's open and permissionless, and has no central point of failure, it's the democratization of money. Policy is not decided by an elite group or a cartel of a bunch of bankers. Literally, you can participate in a system willingly and openly and participate in it to the point to where you're not subjected to the decisions of just a few. Bitcoin is the separation of state and money. And honestly, blockchain technology is going to revolutionize how we do business, how we do commerce, how we transact with each other. The best example that I can give is, imagine this book right here is an old-fashioned ledger right here. Now, I want you to imagine that each page in this ledger is a block, right? And what's happening is this ledger is also a software. This software is being operated on millions of computers around the world. You have people mining, you have people running full nodes, full versions of the ledger. So we're getting a accurate and consensus-based record keeping when it comes to who did what, when they did it, how much they spent, and all of this is being updated at the same moment, at the same time between all of these computers, and they're coming to consensus every 10 minutes. So I think what it's going to do is, blockchain is going to change how we not only use money, but how we vote, how we store car titles. It's literally going to decentralize true real world wealth and value.
Chris, I want to come to you. Kind of break down, Matt just gave us a great look at blockchain. You do mining. What is that? How does that work with blockchain? Explain that to me.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing up Matthew first, because he was able to begin the conversation of the ledger and the millions of miners. I just looked up, currently we have 202 million terahash of processing power operating on the network. To give you a perspective,
I'm going to stop you. What is terahash? What does that mean?
That's what we're getting at. So a terahash is like a horsepower. How much? So there's different kinds of machines. They are called ASICs that are mining. And what mining is, it's protecting the network. It's a security protocol. So it's like a vault. It's actually the form of distribution of new Bitcoin. So it's like the mint, but it also is the ledger, the blockchain network. So it's also like your bank teller. So it operates multiple facets of, essentially the network is now the virtual banking system and mint and vault. And so right now, 202 million terahash, a typical single machine is on average about 95 terahash. So that's over 30 million machines across the globe participating in the security protocol and processing the SHA-256 formula. And that's essentially, that's the backbone to this whole security protocol. Now, each machine is also costly. Right now, you're looking at about $10,000 a machine. So it's a very expensive network. And one of the brilliant things about Bitcoin is it is more expensive to try and steal Bitcoin than it is to just get involved in Bitcoin. They've de-incentivized any kind of attempt at trying to hack the network. On top of that, this is a democratic ledger, meaning you'd have to hack over 50% of all of the mining machines to be able to create a fraudulent ledger entry saying, okay, I have this Bitcoin and everybody else says I don't. But if there's ever a conflict, if anyone ever says, oh, okay, what it is, it's going to be a democratic voice of all the machines. So to give you a perspective, you have to hack over 150 million computers across the globe in under 10 minutes. Some people would say that's impossible. Mathematically, it's probably 0.000, 100 zeros, 0.1%, but still, that is why Bitcoin is truly the most secure and the most safe place to put money and put wealth. It's also finite. There will only be 21 million Bitcoin mined. And the mining process, as you asked earlier, is all of these machines that are contributing towards the network of security. Ledger is rewarded. We're paid a little fragment of Bitcoin every 10 minutes. So that is a reward. Now that is newly minted Bitcoin, and we get to put that into circulation. We're also paid a transaction fee anytime somebody moves Bitcoin. So that's like when you use your Visa, there's like a 1% transaction fee. Very similarly, we're rewarded on that as well. So that's where our income is. So we're financially incentivized to stay plugged in. Well, you do use a copious amount of power. If we want to talk about power and the ESG issues, the green energy issues, we can address that, but that's a slightly different subject. Up to you if you want to go down that path. I love going down that path.
I can already tell this is going to be a two-parter probably, because I'm going to come to our sort of lay people. I bet you guys never thought you'd be lay people in this industry, but you know, as you listen to this, I'd like to get your reaction, David, first from you about what you're hearing so far.
No, I think it's great. I appreciate the comments of everybody. It's certainly, I definitely agree that as a responsible portion of your portfolio, it's a great thing to have some money in as part of the overall diversification of what you're investing in. I do see it moving forward. I've been lucky enough to teach overseas in Europe and Italy for the last 20 years. 20 years ago, it was mostly a cash and carry society. A lot of restaurants and things did not have Visa machines. That's gone. It's that transition from cash from your ATM to going to buying things, and now it's Visa. And I see this as the same kind of transition from towards this type of way to acquire assets and purchase things.
All right, Damon, I want to come to you. President Biden recently signed an executive order on the possibility of regulating cryptocurrency, but there was also discussion of an American digital dollar. Would that be something that would be positive for investors, a digital currency rather than having the dollar in my hand?
Well, I think the bigger question is whether they think it's going to be beneficial or not. It's going to happen eventually. And really what we're talking about, it's the acronym CBDC, a central bank digital currency. You'll probably see that acronym. So I think it may be a couple of things. Again, I look at this, I try to look at both sides of any situation here. I think that a lot of crypto proponents saw that as a plus. You know, hey, the federal government, at least in the form of the president, is issuing an executive order. Now, he didn't say, I'm creating crypto. Basically, what he did was he reached out to all the regulatory agencies and says, all right, guys, you all play nice now, and put together some research to see what would this look like if we created an environment where people could use digital currency rather than the dollars. I mean, let's face it. How many of us right now in the panel, if you opened your wallet, actually have any cash in your wallet? Maybe, okay, you do. All right. I'll be honest.
A little bit.
I don't carry much cash. I use my debit card. I carry cash if I'm traveling and I need to give tips to people getting me to and from places. Okay. So
it's for parking for me. I use it for the
there
parking.
You go. whatever you do. But even now, almost everything can be purchased digitally with a debit card or a credit card, something like that. Now, on the flip side, I think that you might have some people who think, well, if we're going to move to a digital dollar, then what do we need Bitcoin for? What do we need crypto for? Now, I think that to Matt's point, you'd say, well, but the dollar is still, even if it's in digital form, a fiat currency, whereas crypto is democratized. It is not controlled by any one central bank. But really what I want to touch on from an investment standpoint is something that Chris mentioned, and that is the power consumption. That could be a problem. So you may remember a while back, the price of Bitcoin shot up when Elon Musk came out and said, we are going to now accept Bitcoin as payment for Teslas, okay? And the price of Bitcoin went way up. Number one, I have a problem with an asset that one person can open their mouth. And, of course, you could make the argument that that's any asset really. But he opened his mouth and Bitcoin shot up. And then what happened? Not long after that, he came out and said, well, we're not going to do that, because he was made aware that it takes a lot of power, a lot of energy, a big carbon footprint to mine this Bitcoin. And Tesla is an electric, we tout ourselves as environmentally friendly. And as you see more and more investors place importance on ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance, they see themselves as low carbon footprint, as socially responsible. I'm curious how many companies, even though Bitcoin has value, how many companies who want to be seen as environmentally friendly will want to take that as payment if they're trying to make sure that they go out. How can you reconcile we're environmentally friendly, yet we accept payment in a currency that uses up a lot of a lot of power consumption. Maybe the process of mining, and Chris, you probably have a better idea of this, maybe the process of mining, like a lot of industries, can be made more efficient so that that power consumption isn't as much. But right now, those two, there's a disconnect between being environmentally friendly and the mining of Bitcoin.
I think Matt put his hand up. He goes next.
I want to speak to this a little bit, and I know Chris will probably want to speak to this too. There's going to be a ginormous push about the ESG stuff in order to fearmonger people not to get into Bitcoin. The first thing we have to realize about money in general, money is a representation of our life. It is a representation of our life force, our time, labor, energy, and resources. And what makes something a fair form of money is the simple fact that both the producer and the user have to spend time, labor, energy, and resources to either bring it into existence or work for it. Right now, our current system is not like that. The proof of stake, I have my real issues with that, and I could go down the road and talk about that later. But I do want to address, we have to look at the utility of Bitcoin's value proposition. Let's think about this, the petrodollar, the fiat dollar system. In order to keep the United States as the world reserve currency, we have had to basically print money out of thin air to fund a massive military in order to protect the trade routes, in order to incentivize OPEC nations to still trade their oil in dollars. Think about how many fossil fuels that the US military uses. We use 4.6 billion gallons of fossil fuel a year to protect the dollar. And Bitcoin currently uses as much energy as the country of Sweden. And that might sound like a lot, but think about this. Bitcoin currently only uses half of the amount of the energy that is needed to run the current banking system, along with the gold mining industry. Bitcoin's proof of work basically incentivizes miners to find the cheapest form of energy. And guess what? The cheapest form of energy is not always fossil fuels. It's actually renewable energies in remote locations. And so Bitcoin allows you to unlock the potential of natural and remote energy sources, things like hydro, wind, solar. And with a satellite connection, you can literally set up a mining rig in remote locations and monetize this energy. And like I said, money is a tool that represents energy. Bitcoin is the only tool that does not bleed this energy during its transportation. Oil and natural gas companies, let's speak on this for a minute. They are using Bitcoin mining to capture this flaring that's really bad for the environment, and they're turning this into electricity and they're mining Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is actually helping the environment in this matter. And then also, we need to be mindful that, this is new and emerging, and to think that, we need to poo-poo it immediately because we don't understand it or because it's using a lot of energy. Well, what is the utility value of that energy consumption?
So Chris, I want to come to you. First of all, if you have any comments about that, I'd love to hear something new to add on that point. But wouldn't government regulation kind of go against the idea of what Bitcoin is if the government steps in and starts regulating it?
Absolutely. There's 100%. Saying that you want to make a centralized cryptocurrency is kind of like saying we want to make a superhero with no superpowers. So they might have the cape and they might have some kind of giant letter on their chest, and they might run around in spandex with their underwear on the outside. However, they can't fly, shoot laser eyes, or lift tall buildings. So I think it's a step in the right direction on an optics level to see an administration try to encourage, like Damon said, everyone, we start getting along. This is inevitable. This is going to be part of our society. They just want to play with it because they want to retain control and power. And that goes against the principles of cryptocurrency. It's putting the power back in the hands of the people. And to echo Matt's excellent depiction of the energy issue, we're actually solving energy crisis. We are one of the #1 industries, if not the #1, pushing for alternative energy, green energy. And Oklahoma, as a state, is one of the #1 in the nation. We are sitting at 35 to 45% wind energy in our state. We're sitting at over 20% hydro. We're at less than 9% coal, which is the primary carbon contributor. And the remainder is natural gas, which we're using primarily flare and stranded natural gas to power these generations. This is gas that normally would be contributing to the carbon footprint. We're decreasing that contribution by utilizing it. And essentially, there's something that I always like to leave people with on this understanding of power. Bitcoin can operate as a green, earth-friendly battery. And you might go, how does it hold power? Well, essentially, if you have stranded energy you can't get somewhere easily, you're going to have to put it into a battery to transport that energy. If it's too far away to have a cable, or it's just too remote in general, well, batteries are actually incredibly a detriment to our earth in many ways. A lot of the minerals we have to mine and the costs, and unfortunately, they're also being mined in many countries that don't have the regulations that we do to protecting our earth. So if you can take a stranded energy, instead of putting it in a battery, put it into the cloud digitally with no emissions to transport and to hold, and later on you can use that funds to create energy elsewhere, to actually essentially portably move that resource at no cost to our earth and a very small cost to your pocketbook.
It's a lot of faith in the cloud. And I'm just fuddy-duddy enough to still twitch a little bit over it, but I'm getting used to it. David, when we look at this, is cryptocurrency being accepted more and more as a form of payment? What are you seeing?
No, I think it is. It's like any new technology. There's the early adopters, and then eventually works its way to the mainstream. I think we are past the very early adoption phase, but we are still fairly early on, I think. But it's certainly moving in that direction.
Yeah, I would, and I echo you, David. I mean, while right now for a lot of retirees, Bitcoin is still quite volatile. Okay, and Matt, I hear what you're saying, but it's tough when you're sitting in front of a client and they see that their accounts have fallen down, and they see these wild swings. So it's going to be a hard sell for a lot of advisors. I'm not saying it isn't going to happen. I mean, right now I'm educating myself. I'm learning from you guys because I want to know. I want to use every tool in my toolbox. Like I said, I don't want to discount any financial strategy, but I'm going to follow the advice I give my clients. I'm not going to recommend something until I really understand it. That being said, I just had a thought and it completely left my mind. I'm sure it'll come back here.
That's my signature move, Damon.
I do believe that Bitcoin and other cryptos are going to become more mainstream. They are going to become accepted forms of currency more and more. I think it's inevitable. I am concerned about the regulation, the taxation. Okay, I mean, the IRS is now taxing Bitcoin transactions. You don't get taxed when you use US dollars to buy Bitcoin. You do get taxed when you sell it or use it in a transaction. And I actually do remember what I was going to say. One of the barriers to getting into Bitcoin is to buy one coin. I don't know what's the price right now, somewhere around $40,000.
$47,516 at this very moment.
On the day that we're recording this year. But there are more and more affordable, less capital intensive options. You're seeing mutual funds, you're seeing exchange traded funds, you're seeing various index funds that are being offered by a lot of the big wirehouses. And so it is becoming a little easier to get into the market, so that if you do want to allocate a percentage or 2% or so of your portfolio, it is easier to get into Bitcoin to be able to do that. So
let me ask real quick, can you buy a piece of a coin? You don't have to buy a whole coin, do you?
Yes. You can buy a small fraction called a Satoshi. And I mean, we're talking, you can enter at technically just a few dollars. So a few cents, technically, I wouldn't recommend it due to the transaction fee. But I tell people, I literally, as a demo, pull up my phone and buy $25 in front of them to show how simple it is.
Right. And I would say, Bitcoin is divisible by 8 decimal points. And I think the thing we have to consider, especially when it comes to the volatility aspect of it, when something is becoming a form of money, historically, first it's a collectible, then it moves into this store of value stage, which we're seeing fighting inflation. I mean, let's think about this. The dollar store is no longer a dollar. It's $1.25. Ever since the creation of the Federal Reserve, the dollar has lost 98% of its value. Now, that seems not like a good thing to me, whereas Bitcoin has gone up in dollar forms from pennies to now $47,000. And so when we compare the two monetary systems and what's actually going on in them, and you start thinking in terms of Bitcoin instead of dollars, which are dying, it actually starts to make a lot of sense. Bitcoin is acting like this digital form of gold. And I think when it comes to the whole, transactions and taxations, right now, one of my key efforts that even in Oklahoma that I tried to do was, as long as it acts like a currency and not like a security, it does not need to be taxed. And I do think eventually we will get to that point, but we're very early in this evolution phase. I mean, because once it becomes a store of value, then it moves into this medium of exchange, which we'll see more and more throughout time. And then after that medium of exchange stage, it eventually turns into a true measure of wealth. And so what we're witnessing is something that us humans in our lifetime and even in our generations have not witnessed, something like a free market form of money like Bitcoin becoming.
Well, Oklahoma, do we have a lot of companies doing this, mining this, doing what you two are doing, Chris and Matt? Are we in the forefront of this?
Absolutely. We have had, just in the past 8 months, over 1.8 gigawatts of mining operations relocate to Oklahoma. To put in perspective, a gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts. 1 megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts, and your typical home uses less than 5. So a megawatt, so you can see this is a lot of power. I mean, a lot of people don't talk in these, they don't even know how much their house uses. And most of this is on green energy. We have a 250 megawatt facility that's being built in Pryor off the GRDA dam energy, the hydro energy. So that is going to be clean energy. And a lot of it's also off of OG&E, which is mostly natural gas and wind. So I'd also like to just kind of make a comment on the volatility. I too am very conservative. I don't make any recommendations to operate outside of Bitcoin. Sometimes I say you can go into Ethereum, but people ask me about all the other alternate coins, and I go, I am not going to professionally advise you on any of those. I find Bitcoin, if you look at a logarithmic scale, instead of just the ups and downs, if you look at the logarithmic scale, you actually start seeing a very definitive curve, a nice gradual and reliable. And I always use the valleys. I don't look at the peaks. I don't look at, how high did it go? I want to see yesterday's valley is lower than today's valley. And that has been a consistent over time, as long as you have patience. This is not a get rich quick scheme. This is a legitimate and now institutionalized opportunity for investment. And you see the big guys getting involved. You see Goldman Sachs, you see, Chase Manhattan. They're getting it. They're investing into this. They're seeing the value. The volatility is a subjective concept. We watched oil and gas go through volatility last year that was greater than Bitcoin's volatility. So there's all kinds of shifts that are happening globally. We're participating in it now. And the fact that we're here talking to you on national television here is a proof that the importance is hit a metric. I believe we're past a tipping point where this is a permanent fixture in today's macroeconomics.
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell's book, Tipping Point, reminded me of that. And I agree with you. I've learned a lot with this discussion. And I know there is so much more to be said, more answers to be had. I have so many more questions, but we are out of time. I would like to have more information from you all in the future to educate not only myself, but everyone who's viewing this. I'd like to thank all of you again for your expertise, and I hope to see you back here again soon.